Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual. The Ministry of Transportation of Ontario is responsible for the province's highways and is committed to making them safe, efficient, and high quality. In support of this goal, the Commercial Safety and Compliance Branch of the ministry has prepared this guide to assist commercial truck and bus operators in understanding the legislative requirements they are to meet in order to be safe and compliant on Ontario's highways. The use of this guide should increase knowledge of the provincial safety requirements, resulting in a more efficient and safe operation of truck and bus operators. This guide is also the study guide for the Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration CVOR written test. The CVOR test must be completed prior to obtaining a CVOR certificate. See details in Module 4, CVOR. The test is based on information included in this manual. Even if some sections do not apply to specific operators, it is important to read all materials in this manual prior to taking the test. When preparing for the CVOR test, the following modules are recommended to be reviewed. Additionally, the appendices of this manual are intended for future reference and are not included in the test questions. Module 4, CVOR. Module 5, Ontario Specific Enforcement Issues. Module 7, Safety Programs, Record Keeping, and Driver Files. Module 8, Preventative Maintenance, Record Keeping, and Vehicle Files. Module 9, Hours of Service. Please note, the CVOR test is not only based on these modules, however, it may assist with focusing your study time. Table of Contents. Module 1, Introduction. 2, Getting Started. 3, National Safety Code. 4, Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration. 5, Ontario-specific enforcement issues. 6, Facility audit and operator monitoring and intervention. 7, Safety programs, record keeping, and driver files. Module 8, Preventative maintenance, record keeping, and vehicle files. 9, Hours of service. 10, Dangerous goods. 11, Vehicle weights and dimensions. 12, Driver and vehicle licensing. 13, Passenger transportation services. Module 14, Cargo securement. Module 15, Terms of reference. Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual. Module 1, Introduction. Overview. Purpose of this guide. Intended users. Highlight of modules available in this manual. Overview. The Commercial Safety and Compliance Branch of the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario has prepared this guide to assist and ensure that truck and bus companies, commercial vehicle operators, operate safely and are compliant with the regulations that govern highway use. Ontario, other provinces, the Government of Canada, and the transportation industry developed the rules and regulations to help reduce the number and severity of collisions. Each jurisdiction has used the National Safety Code standards as guides in drafting their own transportation safety legislation. This approach promotes uniformity across Canada and helps to ensure that the transportation industry remains as viable and sustainable as possible. This guide applies to Ontario operators of commercial motor vehicles that are trucks, tractors, Mobile equipment vehicles or trailers and or any combination of these vehicles that have a registered gross weight or actual weight of more than 4,500 kilograms. Tow trucks, regardless of registered gross weight or actual weight. Buses with a manufactured seating capacity of 10 persons or more, excluding the driver. Accessible vehicles and school purpose vehicles, depending upon use. This guide contains several modules, each dealing with a specific topic. To get a complete picture of compliance requirements, you should obtain the complete guide. If you intend to use certain parts of this guide only, for example, Module 1, Getting Started, it is recommended that you also obtain the module's Introduction and Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration. This is a guide only and is not meant to be a substitute for the relevant statutes and regulations. This guide highlights some important legal provisions, but is not an exhaustive description of all the laws that apply. Purpose of this guide. Ontario highways are shared by public and by commercial vehicles of all descriptions. Motorists have become more and more concerned about safety as a result of increasing numbers of vehicles using the highways. This increase, especially of heavier vehicles, contributes significantly to the wear and tear of the highway infrastructure. The Ministry of Transportation of Ontario is responsible for the province's highways and is committed to making them safe, efficient, and high quality. In support of that, the Commercial Safety and Compliance Branch of the ministry has prepared this guide to assist commercial truck and bus operators to operate safely and to be compliant with the legislation that governs highway use. The main reason for developing this guide is to help operators and drivers operate commercial motor vehicles efficiently and safely by understanding and complying with Ontario's legislative requirements. The use of this guide should increase compliance with safety requirements, resulting in a more efficient and safe operation. Specifically, this guide was developed to study guide, provide information for the Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration CVOR written test. The CVOR test must be completed prior to obtaining a CVOR certificate. See details in Module 4, CVOR. Help existing and future drivers, managers, and operators of truck and bus companies understand applicable legislation and safe operating procedures. Encourage operators to abide by the legislation and to implement safe operating procedures. Provide resources and contact information to current and future operators in Ontario, Canada, and the United States. Increase cooperation and understanding between industry and government. Help operators develop, update, and implement their safety and maintenance programs. Provide direct and information for new drivers and operators in the industry. This guide will assist operators in complying with the legislation and related regulations as follows: Highway Traffic Act, Ontario; Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act, Canada; Dangerous Goods Transportation Act; Compulsory Automobile Insurance Act; Public Vehicles Act; Fuel Tax Act. This guide is not meant to be a substitute for this legislation. Copies of the relevant acts and regulations for Ontario are available at no cost from the Ontario e-Laws website. Copies of the federal legislation are available from the federal government. Print version of the Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual. A copy of the complete Commercial Vehicle Operator Safety Manual can be saved or printed. The ministry does not produce printed versions of this manual. Intended users. This guide is intended to assist new operators in the highway transportation industry, including but not limited to trucks that have a registered gross weight or actual weight of over 4,500 kilograms, and buses that can carry 10 or more passengers, excluding the driver. Tow truck operators. New operators preparing to complete the Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration CVOR written test. Existing operators who need to have a clear understanding of their responsibilities, relevant acts, regulations, and requirements. Truck and bus operators who transport dangerous goods or have a specific requirement covered in this guide. Maintenance staff who repair, maintain, and test drive commercial vehicles. Safety officers responsible for ensuring the safe operation of commercial vehicles and driver safety. Staff responsible for ensuring that administrative procedures are identified and used. Company management seeking to comply with legislative requirements. Highlight of modules available in this manual. Introduction. Outline the purpose of the Commercial Vehicle Operator's Safety Manual and the intended users. Getting started provides a summary of some of the items to consider when setting up a truck or bus business, including writing a business plan, International Registration Plan (IRP), International Fuel Tax Agreement (IFTA). National Safety Code provides a list of relevant standards and a summary of the 16 national safety codes for Canada and how they are adopted in Ontario. Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration provides a summary of the requirements under the Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration CVOR, identify who needs to obtain a CVOR certificate and how to apply and how a carrier safety rating is calculated. Ontario specific enforcement issues provides information on enforcement issues that are specific to Ontario, including Commercial Vehicle Impoundment Program, CVIP, speed limiters, facility audit and operator monitoring and intervention, provides details on how Ontario monitors, audits, and applies sanctions to operators who are not meeting their safety requirements. Safety programs, record keeping, and driver files provides best practices of record keeping, hiring staff, and developing a safety program. Outlines the record keeping requirements for driver files. Preventative maintenance, record keeping, and vehicle files provides details, a sample report, and requirements for vehicle maintenance and inspections, includes daily, annual, semi-annual, and CVSA inspection. Safety standards certificates, preventative maintenance, out of province and US operators. Hours of service describes Ontario requirements related to reducing driver fatigue, outlines driving limitations, record keeping requirements, and an operator's responsibilities to be proactive and reactive with the monitoring of their drivers. Dangerous goods provides an overview of dangerous goods, including identifying them, training staff, safety requirements, and information and emergency contacts. Vehicle weights and dimensions describes weight and dimension limitations for vehicles and overweight permit process. Driver and vehicle licensing provides an overview of vehicle registration requirements and driver licensing requirements. Passenger Transportation Services provides a high-level overview of operating authority requirements. Cargo Securement provides an overview of the directive to secure a vehicle's cargo, including securing devices, requirements, and commodity-specific applications. Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual, Module 2, Getting Started. Overview, Getting Started, Learning Objectives, Starting Your Business and the Business Plan, Municipal Government, Provincial Government, Federal Government, International Registration Plan, IRP, Registering with IRP, IRP Application Process, International Fuel Tax Agreement, IFTA, When to Register with IFTA, Registering with IFTA, Helpful Links. Overview. The Commercial Safety and Compliance Branch of the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario has prepared this guide to assist and ensure that truck and bus companies, commercial vehicle operators, operate safely and are compliant with the regulations that govern highway use. Ontario, other provinces, the Government of Canada, and the transportation industry developed the rules and regulations to help reduce the number and severity of collisions. Each jurisdiction has used the National Safety Code standards as guides in drafting their own transportation safety legislation. This approach promotes uniformity across Canada and helps to ensure the transportation industry remains as viable and sustainable as possible. This guide applies to Ontario operators of commercial motor vehicles that are trucks, tractors, mobile equipment vehicles, or trailers, and/or any combination of these vehicles that have a registered gross weight or actual weight of more than 4,500 kilograms. Tow trucks, regardless of registered gross weight or actual weight. Buses with a manufactured seating capacity of 10 persons or more, excluding the driver. Accessible vehicles and school purposes vehicles depending upon use. This guide contains several modules, each dealing with a specific topic. To get a complete picture of compliance requirements, you should obtain the complete guide. If you intend to use certain parts of this guide only, for example, Module 1, Getting Started, it is recommended that you also obtain the modules Introduction and Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration. This is a guide only and is not meant to be a substitute for relevant statutes and regulations. This guide highlights some important legal provisions, but is not an exhaustive description of all the laws that apply. Getting started, learning objectives. As you work through this module, you will be able to review information about and consider writing a business plan. Obtain information and requirements from the 3 levels of government: municipal, provincial, and federal. Apply to be a registrant in the International Registration Plan, IRP. Report fuel taxes when operating in different jurisdictions under the International Fuel Tax Agreement, IFTA. Understand some of the items to consider when setting up a truck or bus business. It is important to do as much in-depth research as possible on each of these items before getting on the road. For information on how to apply for a commercial vehicle operator's registration, CVOR certificate, see Module 4. Starting your business and the business plan. Doing a bit of research, deciding what you really want to do, and putting that in a business plan will guide you toward success. Your business plan will also be useful if you require assistance from bankers, accountants, and lawyers. There are many resources available to help you write a business plan. These are available from libraries, bookstores, or the Ontario government website for businesses and economy. You can use these resources to write your own plan, or you could hire a professional to help you. Whatever you decide to do, initially at least, your business plan should be fairly simple and easily updated. Once you have a clear idea of what you will be doing, you will need to set up the business. In Ontario, businesses can be set up based upon your circumstances, such as sole proprietorship, partnership, or limited incorporated entity, company. Each of these has different setup procedures, legal requirements, and financial consequences. Since you may eventually need a legal representative to set up your business, it is worthwhile discussing with a lawyer the type of business that meets your needs. Financial accounting is very important for the successful operation of any business. As part of preparing your business plan, you should consult an accountant to discuss financial record keeping, business forms, choosing an appropriate year end tax and other records, as well as accounting fees. In summary, you should talk to your banker about the bank's requirements, talk to your accountant about accounting requirements, set up your company using the services of a lawyer, develop a business plan. You may also decide to do all of the above on your own. For most people, this is a real challenge. It will take you away from your core business activities and use up valuable time. Spending a few $100s working with your accountant and a legal firm may be well worth it. The Canadian Business Network website offers links to tools and guides designed to assist you with developing your business idea, preparing a business plan, assessing your entrepreneurial qualities, as well as providing an overview of the benefits and challenges of owning a small business. Starting a business. There are several tools and resources available to ensure that you have all the requirements to operate your business. The following sources will help you identify permit requirements, tax accounts, employee payroll deductions, insurance requirements, registering your business, and so on. Requirements specific to truck and bus operators are outlined in future modules of this guide, such as commercial vehicle operators registration. When you are starting a new business, it is recommended that you investigate your requirements at all levels of government: municipal, provincial, territorial, and federal. As a commercial motor vehicle operator, you also should be knowledgeable of the requirements for the jurisdictions in which you operate. What follows are sources and links to assist new business owners. Municipal government. Each municipal government, city, town, or county/rural municipality, has the authority to issue its own business licenses within its jurisdiction. Since each municipality differs, you should consult with officials to decide how your business will be affected by local regulations, taxation, licenses, or zoning requirements. You may also need to obtain licenses in municipalities in which you are not located but carry on business. Depending upon the type of business you have, other regulations may apply: health and safety, fire, transportation, environmental legislation, labor laws, and so on. For more information on municipal regulations and licenses, contact the clerk of the city, town, village, or rural municipality where you plan to do business. The telephone numbers are available in the telephone book, really? Or through directory assistance. Provincial government. To assist new or future business owners, Ontario has a web section called Business and Economy. Starting a business, planning a business, understanding the marketplace, registering a business, obtaining financing, getting permits and licenses, hiring and managing staff, developing facilities and properties, operating a business, marketing and selling, researching, growing, and innovating, greening your business, finding legal services, filing taxes and tax information, incorporating your business, selling to government, exiting a business. Ontario Ministry of Finance provides tools for tax requirements. Ontario Ministry of Labour provides tools for employees, including employment standards and health and safety. Federal government. New or future business owners can find assistance from the federal government with its information online at Canadian Business Networks. Starting a business is entrepreneurship for you, developing your ideas, developing your business plan, business name and registration, buying a business, forms of business organization, financing your business, choosing and setting up a location, checklists and guides for starting a business. About Canadian businesses, starting a business, growth and innovation, grants and finances, taxes, regulations, licenses and permits, export, import, and foreign investment, hiring and managing staff, business planning, management and operations, market research and statistics, marketing and sales, selling to government, copyright and intellectual property, environment and business, exiting your business. Revenue Canada has additional tools for tax requirements and wage deductions, including a publication called RC 4070 Guide for Canadian Small Businesses. See the Canada Revenue Agency website for more information. International Registration Plan, IRP. IRP is a North American agreement for the distribution of commercial vehicle registration fees. Operators with Ontario plated vehicles operating in other jurisdictions can apply through the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, prorate offices for registration in other Canadian provinces or territories, or in individual states of the US. Ontario implemented IRP on April 1st, 2001, with the exception of charter or tour buses. All operators traveling outside Ontario with vehicles having a gross vehicle weight in excess of 11,793 kilograms or more than 3 axles, regardless of the weight, should register in IRP. Otherwise, these operators will have to purchase separate trip permits to travel outside Ontario. Charter or tour buses have full and free vehicle registration reciprocity in most states and provinces. For this reason, these bus operators have the option of registering in IRP or operating with only their home province/territory registration. Operators should check to see if the jurisdictions they will be traveling into or through grant charter or tour bus reciprocity. Buses that operate in interjurisdictional line run scheduled services must register in IRP. The IRP provides blanket registration for trucks and buses as an alternative to individual reciprocity agreements and distributes truck and bus registration fees among member jurisdictions based on the number of kilometers operators travel in other jurisdictions. Vehicles will have one license plate and registration document, cab card, which allows travel in all jurisdictions noted on the card. Registering with IRP. One registration to operate in the provinces and states. One province or state to deal with for the IRP license and remit registration fees. One province or state that collects the registration fees and distributes the fees to all IRP provinces and states. IRP application process. Operators may hand in or fax IRP applications to their local prorate office. Once they receive an application, it will be processed and a fee notice will be sent to the operator. If changes are required, the operator should contact the prorate office and send in a revised application. Once the operator is satisfied with the application, payment can be made to the local prorate office. Credentials will be given in person to the operator by the prorate staff or sent to the operator by mail. Courier service is available at the expense of the operator. Any original documents required for the transaction must be made available to the prorate office before the credentials are released. Under the IRP, an operator files an application in their home jurisdiction. The IRP agreement allows the base jurisdiction to collect the registration fees for the other IRP jurisdictions. These fees are based upon mileage and weight information submitted by the operator. The base jurisdiction issues cab cards for each vehicle. The cab card is the only license credential needed to operate a vehicle in all the member IRP jurisdictions. It lists all the IRP jurisdictions and corresponding weights that the operator has requested. All member IRP jurisdictions are required to comply with the following three basic concepts: issuance of an appointed license plate, issuance of a single registration document or cab card, allowance to operate within or between jurisdictions. An IRP apportioned registration does not exempt an operator from the payment of motor fuel taxes in any province or state, exempt an operator from obtaining a bus operating authority license and or a commercial vehicle operator's registration, permit an operator to exceed maximum height, length, width, and axle limitations. Information and registration forms are available through the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario website. Ontario apportioned cab card sample. 123 Trucking Inc., 456 Any Street, Toronto, Ontario. And we will just quickly peruse this. This document cannot be used for vehicle transfer purposes, and then shows the provinces and states of this particular cab card. International Fuel Tax Agreement, IFTA. The province of Ontario is a member of IFTA. This agreement among Canadian provinces/territories and American states simplifies the reporting of fuel taxes by commercial vehicle operators who do business in more than one member province/territory or state. In order to register under IFTA, the minimum registered gross vehicle weight requirement is more than 11,797 kilograms, 26,000 pounds, or a unit with three or more axles, regardless of the weight. When to register with IFTA. You should register for IFTA with Ontario if your commercial vehicles are considered a qualified motor vehicle. This means a motor vehicle used for business purposes and has three or more axles or weighs more than 11,797 kilograms. Vehicle and trailer. For full details, refer to the definition of qualified motor vehicle. You have an established place of business in Ontario where you maintain operational control of your qualified motor vehicles. You keep records for your qualified motor vehicles in Ontario or make these records available to the Ontario Ministry of Finance. Your qualified motor vehicles travel in Ontario and at least one other province or state. Registering with IFTA. One fuel use license to operate in the provinces and states. One province or state to deal with for the IFTA license and to report motor fuel taxes. One province or state that collects the motor fuel taxes from you and distributes the taxes to all IFTA provinces and states based on distance traveled. The Ontario Ministries of Transportation and Finance have established an industry advisory committee for IRP and IFTA. This group is composed of representatives from the Ontario Trucking Association, the Ontario Motor Coach Association, the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada, permitting agencies, private trucking firms, and representatives from both ministries. The committee meets when needed to discuss issues regarding IRP service delivery in Ontario. Information is available from the Ministry of Finance website or by calling 1-866 ONT-TAXS and a sample of an IFTA license. Helpful links. Basic traveler's information such as interactive maps, road maps, weather conditions, construction, border information, etc., can be found on the MTO website. Border wait times can be found on the Canadian Border Services Agency website. Free and secure trade information can be found on the Canadian Border Services Agency website. Other Canadian sites: Transport Canada, Ontario Provincial Government, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Northwest Territories, Yukon Territorial, and Nunavut Territorial government websites. Canadian Council of Motor Transportation Administrators. U.S. sites: U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, Federal Highway Administration. Commercial Vehicle Operators Safety Manual, Module 3, Ontario Legislation and the National Safety Code. Overview: Ontario legislation and NSC learning objectives, important acts and regulations, Ontario legislation, federal legislation, international agreements, copies of legislation and regulations, the National Safety Code, NSC, and provincial legislation. Overview: the Commercial Safety and Compliance Branch of the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario has prepared this guide to assist and ensure that truck and bus companies, commercial vehicle operators, operate safely and are compliant with the regulations that govern highway use. Ontario, other provinces, the Government of Canada, and the transportation industry developed the rules and regulations to help reduce the number and severity of collisions. Each jurisdiction has used the National Safety Code standards as guides in drafting their own transportation safety legislation. This approach promotes uniformity across Canada and helps to ensure that the transportation industry remains as viable and sustainable as possible. This guide applies to Ontario operators of commercial motor vehicles that are trucks, tractors, mobile equipment vehicles and or trailers and or any combination of these vehicles that have a registered gross weight or actual weight of more than 4,500 kilograms. Tow trucks, regardless of registered gross weight or actual weight. Buses with a manufactured seating capacity of 10 persons or more, excluding the driver. Accessible vehicles and school purposes vehicles, depending upon use. This guide contains several modules, each dealing with a specific topic. To get a complete picture of compliance requirements, you should obtain the complete guide. If you intend to use certain parts of this guide only, for example, Module 1, Getting Started, it is recommended that you also obtain the modules Introduction and Commercial Vehicle Operators Registration. This is a guide only and is not meant to be a substitute for relevant statutes and regulations. This guide highlights some important legal provisions, but is not an exhaustive description of all the laws that apply. Ontario legislation and NSC learning objectives. As you work through this module, you will be able to access the regulations under the Highway Traffic Act that affect commercial vehicle operators. Know how the NSC standards are applied and enforced in Ontario. Describe how the NSC relates to provincial and federal legislation. Describe the 16 standards of the NSC. Important acts and regulations. Several legal acts affect a commercial vehicle operator. It is important to be familiar with these acts and with their regulations. Some are federal and apply all across Canada. Others are provincial and apply only in Ontario. Many regulations are similar across Canada and through parts of the United States. But be aware whenever your vehicles are driven into a different province, territory, or state that some regulations may not be the same on the other side of the border. For more information, visit some of the websites for the specific jurisdiction in which you travel. See Module 2, Getting Started, for a list of helpful links. Ontario legislation. All drivers, vehicles, and roadways within the province of Ontario fall under the Highway Traffic Act, HTA, and its related regulations. The regulations that primarily affect commercial vehicle operators include HTA Regulation 629, Accessible Vehicles, HTA Regulation 199/07, Commercial Motor Vehicle Inspections, HTA Regulation 424/97, Commercial Motor Vehicle Operators Information, HTA Regulation 577, Covering of Loads, HTA Regulation 512/97, Critical Defects of Commercial Motor Vehicle, HTA Regulation 340/94, Driver's Licenses, HTA Regulation 587, Equipment includes speed limiters, HTA Regulation 596, General, HTA Regulation 555/06, Hours of Service, HTA Regulation 601, Motor Vehicle Inspection Stations, HTA Regulation 611, Safety Inspections, includes on-road standards, HTA Regulation 612, School Buses, HTA Regulation 363/04, Security of Loads, HTA Regulation 618, Specifications and Standards for Trailer Couplings, HTA Regulation 625, Tire Standards and Specifications, HTA Regulation 628 Vehicle Permits, HTA Regulation 341/94 Driver License Examinations, HTA Regulation 413/05 Vehicle Weights and Dimensions, Dangerous Goods Transportation Act, Compulsory Automobile Insurance Act, federal legislation, Motor Vehicle Transport Act, MVTA 1987, T6, RSA 2000, MVTA Commercial Vehicle Drivers Hours of Service Regulations 2005, SOR slash 2005 313, Motor Vehicle Safety Fitness Certificate Regulation, SOR slash 2005 180, Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act, international agreements, International Fuel Tax Agreement, International Registration Plan. Copies of legislation and regulations, copies of the Highway Traffic Act and related Ontario regulations are available at no cost on the eLaws website. The National Safety Code, NSC, and provincial legislation. Ontario, other provinces/territories, the Government of Canada, and the transportation industry developed the NSC to help reduce the number and severity of collisions. Each jurisdiction is encouraged to use the NSC standards as guides in drafting their own transportation safety legislation. This approach promotes uniformity across Canada and helps to ensure that the transportation industry remains as viable and sustainable as possible. It is important to note that the provincial legislation and applicable federal legislation directs operators within each province, not the NSC standards. A complete copy of the standards is available on the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators website. NSC standards and the Ontario Highway Traffic Act. The following NSC standards are listed with the applicable Ontario Act and regulation. This information is included to help you know and understand how each standard is applied in Ontario. NSC Standard Number 1, Single Driver License Concept. A standard implemented by all jurisdictions that makes it an offense for a driver to hold more than one license. In addition, a series of administrative procedures has been agreed upon to ensure driving infractions are assigned to a single license and record. Regulated in Ontario by Highway Traffic Act, HTA, driver's licenses O Reg 340/94. NSC Standard Number 2, Knowledge and Performance Tests Drivers. A standard that sets out the process for standardized testing of commercial drivers and includes the criteria for both written and road tests. It also identifies the key elements that will be evaluated by government officials charged with administering the tests. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Driver's License Examinations, Ontario Regulation 341/94. NCS Standard Number 3, Driver Examiner Training Program, a standard designed to upgrade the skills and knowledge of the driver examiners and ensure that they are consistent across Canada. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Driver's License Examinations, OREG 341/94. NCS Standard Number 4, Classified Driver Licensing System, a standard that renders a more uniform classification and endorsement system for driver licenses and ensures that a license issued in one province/territory is recognized in all provinces/territories. Regulated in Ontario by HTA driver's licenses OREG 340/94. This regulation establishes the 12 classes of driver's licenses in Ontario: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G1, G2, M, M1, and M2. The endorsement information explains requirements for specific supplementary driver qualifications. NCS NSC Standard Number 5, Self-Certification Standard and Procedures. A standard outlining the criteria that must be met to permit operators and driver training schools to train commercial drivers. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Licenses for Driving Instructors and Driving Schools, OREG 473/07. This regulation establishes the training and driver testing requirements for operators and driving schools. NSC Standard Number 6, Medical Standards for Drivers. These are the medical standards for drivers from the Canadian Council of Motor Transport Administrators. Initially, Standard Number 6 of the National Safety Code for motor carriers, they set the medical criteria used to establish whether drivers are medically fit to drive. This standard addresses both private and commercial drivers. Regulated in Ontario by HTA driver's licenses OREG 340/94. This regulation establishes the initial medical requirements for each class of driver's license and also the requirements for periodic re-examinations. NSC Standard Number 7, Carrier and Driver Profiles. A standard that is designed to provide jurisdictions with a record of driver and operator performance in terms of compliance with safety rules and regulations. This standard supports the enforcement activity to remove unsatisfactory drivers and operators from service and identifies the type of information that will be maintained about each commercial driver and operator. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Commercial Motor Vehicle Operators Information OREG 424/97. This legislation establishes the minimum list of requirements in each jurisdiction's control system, including records of infractions, collisions, on-road inspections, and facility audits. The information is exchanged among Canadian jurisdictions to obtain complete operator profiles. NSC Standard Number 8, Short-Term Suspensions. A standard that describes the criteria for placing a driver out of service on a short-term, 24-hour basis, when a peace officer has reasonable and probable grounds to believe the driver's ability is affected by alcohol, drugs, or fatigue. Regulated in Ontario by regional and provincial police. This legislation provides for the suspension of a driver's license for up to 24 hours when the driver's ability to operate a vehicle is impaired by alcohol, fatigue, or drugs. NSC Standard Number 9, Hours of Service. A standard that describes the number of hours a driver can be on duty and operate a commercial vehicle. It outlines the requirement to complete daily logs, describe the various cycles of operation, and sets out driver and operator record keeping requirements. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Hours of Service OREG 555/06, MVTA Commercial Vehicle Drivers Hours of Service Regulation, Federal SOR/2005-313. This legislation establishes a commercial driver's allowed hours of service while traveling within Ontario and when crossing into other Canadian and US jurisdictions. NSC Standard Number 10, Cargo Securement, a standard that outlines the specific requirements for securing loads to commercial vehicles to ensure they do not shift, move, or spill onto the roadway. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Security of Loads OREG 363/04. This regulation establishes the minimum requirements for securing loads. NSC Standard Number 11B, Commercial Vehicle Maintenance and Inspection Standards, a standard that outlines maintenance and periodic inspections. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Safety Inspections OREG 611, HTA Motor Vehicle Inspection Stations OREG 601. These regulations establish the minimum standards for the periodic inspection of commercial vehicles. Detailed procedures were developed by a task force of government and industry representatives. NSC Standard Number 12, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance On-Road Inspections, a standard that contains the on-road inspection criteria from the Alliance, adopted by Ontario HTA Section 8.4, Commercial Vehicle Drivers Hours of Service Regulation, Federal SOR/2005-313. These criteria and inspections set the minimum standards for the roadside inspection of drivers and vehicles, as established by the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. Canada, the US, and Mexico have adopted this program as part of their on-road enforcement programs. The criteria outline when vehicle and driver conditions constitute an imminent hazard and can no longer operate on the highway. NSC Standard Number 13, Trip Inspection, a standard that prescribes daily trip inspection requirements, regulated in Ontario by HTA Commercial Motor Vehicle Inspections OREG 199/07. This regulation requires drivers to conduct vehicle inspections and prepare vehicle trip inspection reports and notify the operator of any defects. The operator is then required to repair the reported defects before the vehicle is driven on the highway again. NSC Standard Number 14, Safety Rating, a standard that establishes the motor carrier safety rating framework by which each jurisdiction assesses the safety performance of operators. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Commercial Motor Vehicle Operators Information, Ontario Regulation 424/97. This regulation establishes an operator's carrier safety rating and how sanctions are imposed when necessary. This is applied uniformly across Canada. Information about the driver and the carrier profile system is exchanged through an interprovincial system. This produces a nationally consistent assessment of an operator's safety rating performance and a way to determine whether that performance is adequate to allow continued operation. NSC Standard Number 15, Facility Audits, a standard that outlines the audit process used by jurisdictions to determine an operator's level of compliance with all applicable safety standards. Regulated in Ontario by HTA Commercial Motor Vehicle Operators Information OREG 424/97. This legislation establishes the requirements for the maintenance of records at an operator's principal place of business for on-site review and assessment by government auditors of the operator's safety performance and overall compliance with NSC standards. NSC Standard Number 16, First Aid Training, a voluntary standard outlining the elements that should be included in a basic first aid course for commercial drivers. It is recommended that drivers of commercial vehicles complete an improved first aid training and/or occupational health and safety program. There is currently no legislative requirement in the HTA to support this standard.